I'm going to just quickly glance at the end of chapter 9, because we're going to be in chapter 10. Take a quick glance. The last part of chapter 9, he's emphasizing wisdom, how it's better than other alternatives. It's better than strength. It's better than foolishness. And what can happen if somebody doesn't live by wisdom? In verse 18, wisdom's better than weapons of war, but one sinner destroys much good. And that word sinner can be translated as one who wanders from the way or from the mark. Somebody who gets off the beaten path. All it takes is one to destroy a whole lot of good that people do. So we want to make sure that we aren't one of those ones that destroys the work of others. Help us to, we need to always think about how God wants us to live under the sun. So in chapter 10, it's kind of different here. He starts a series of not parables, proverbs. They're just like the proverbs in the Proverbs of Solomon, just not quite 2 chapters worth, each one dealing with some of the themes that he's been dealing with in the rest of the book. He starts off by saying, dead flies putrefy the perfumer's ointment and cause it to give off a foul odor. And so does a little folly or foolishness to one respected for wisdom and honor. He's talking about reputation here. I think most of us have heard the saying "flies in the ointment." That's where it comes from. Not too many of us have this kind of ointments that they're talking about, and have the experience of flies getting in our perfume, that kind of thing. But we get the picture by looking at it. We know what flies do and how they just I don't know what the best word is, but corrupt or whatever. You don't want them to be crawling around on your food while you're sitting at the dinner table, that kind of stuff. Well, just like we have a bad feeling when we think about flies. I don't know anybody that has a pet fly, but none of us like flies. So just the same kind of thing that flies do to us in our regular life. He says a little bit of foolishness can really mess up the reputation of somebody that's known or respected for wisdom and honor. In other words, we need to be careful of our reputation. We all want to have a reputation for and be respected for wisdom and for honoring God like we ought to, honoring our neighbors, our friends, our families. And we respect somebody that is like that. We all look up to people like that. But take a little side trip and you can ruin a whole reputation. Any comments on that verse? I mean, there's a ton you could say about it, but okay, well, if not, then we'll go on. He says in verse 2, a wise man's heart is at his right, but a fool's heart is at his left. Well, that doesn't make much sense to us in our day and age. That's why I put over to the side. In the ancient Near East, the right hand was looked at as a symbol of strength and skill and honor and reliability. Most people are right-handed and do most of their work with their right hand. And that's where this is derived from. Left hand symbolizes the opposite: weakness, awkwardness, unreliability. And so when he says the wise man's heart is at his right, it means his heart, his center of thinking, his center of action is on the strong side, on the honorable side, reliable side. But fool's heart is weakness, awkwardness, unreliability. So we're seeing what the definition of a fool is as far as Ecclesiastes is concerned. It's not. It's simply a person who is weak, awkward, unreliable, doing stuff without thinking, that sort of thing. So you want to be on the strong side, the honorable side. So put your heart there. Put your heart on good things, on right things. That's how to live your life under the sun. Verse 3 says, even when a fool, and I put in parentheses, just walks along the way, he lacks wisdom. What he's driving at is one of these foolish people, unreliable, not thinking things through, that sort of thing, even just in his daily life. Just when all he's doing is walking along the way. Even when he does that, he lacks wisdom. He shows everyone that he's a fool. So just by his normal life, just walking along, people can tell he's foolish, just by the way he acts. So it's important to know that people are looking at you. They can see how you are, and they can know when you're not being right. Pardon me, my voice has killed me.
They know saying, better to remain silent, be considered a fool, than to speak out and remove all doubt.
Yeah, that's a good saying. Sometimes just by living your life, the things you say, the things you do, tell everybody just who you are. You need to pay attention to that. Verse 4, if the spirit of the ruler rises against you, and that spirit there is referring to temperament, a bad temper. So in other words, if you're a ruler, his temper rises, what does that mean? He's angry. If that happens against you, he says, do not leave your post. That word post is used here figuratively for a condition of the mind. So he says, if your ruler is angry with you, don't get out of the condition of mind that you should be in. Most of the time, if someone's angry with us, especially a superior, we can either get angry back at them for being angry, or we can get scared. There's a lot of different temperaments, but we need to keep a level temperament. And here's how I know that that's what he means. He says, here's why. That word for, we've seen it all through the book of Hebrews and seen it a bunch of times here in Ecclesiastes. That word for means here's why. And here's why. Why keep a level temperament? Don't leave your temperament, or don't leave your condition of the mind that you're in. He says, because conciliation pacifies great offenses. If you keep a level head, you keep a level state of mind, you're going to say, okay, here I am here he is here. How am I going to act? Am I going to get mad? And what happens if I get mad? He's going to do things up to and including cutting my head off. And if I act fearful, what's he going to think? Oh, this guy is a coward. Do I really want him doing things for me? Just keep your head and be conciliatory. Okay, you're angry with me. I made a mistake. I'm sorry. What can I do to correct it? That sort of thing. And he's just saying, keep your head. Now, remember, we're talking about life under the sun, living life here on earth. That's how to get through this life. You start, you do something that makes a superior of yours angry. You don't want to make things worse by, returning like for like or any of that kind of stuff. Use your head. That's how to get through life under the sun. Any comments? All right, we're going to continue on in verse 5. There is an evil that I have seen under the sun, and we've seen evil, that word evil, numerous times already in the book of Ecclesiastes, and it doesn't mean evil morally. It's not talking about moral. It's talking about just life under the sun, evil in the sense of a bad situation. I've seen evil. I've seen a bad situation under the sun as an error proceeding from the ruler. Verse 6, folly is, here's what he's talking about, this error that proceeds from the ruler. He says, folly is set in great dignity, while the rich sitting in a lowly place. Now, that word rich, I showed out the side, means qualified, capable, of noble character. That's why they translated it rich, is because that's how you normally think the rich people. That's how they got that way, is by having these characteristics. But anyway, what he's saying is what we've been seeing in Ecclesiastes for quite a while, and that is that things don't go the way you think they should. A foolish person, can be set up on high in great dignity, while a qualified, capable, noble person sits in a lowly place. That doesn't make sense. The person that deserves to be boosted up may stay down, not get promoted, just simply because he's quiet and doesn't put himself forward there, while this foolish person gets promoted. What happens when you have trouble with a teacher at school? You make him an assistant principal. You know, you move them up the ladder, get them into a different spot where they're not causing trouble, and that happens a lot of times throughout the ranks. My brother-in-law Jim was just telling me this morning about a colonel or something got married to a woman who was in the Air Force also, and she was causing trouble. Oh no, he wanted to get married to her. They weren't married yet, I don't think. And his upper boss said, no, you can't do that. You can't have the low people connected with the high people. It can't work that way. So he worked his way somehow and got her a promotion to be an officer. And according to Jim, she didn't deserve that spot. But anyway, that's the kind of thing that we're talking about here. And he says, I've seen that. That's a bad thing. That's a bad situation here on earth. I've seen it, and it's an error, but that's how life is under the sun. Guy that doesn't deserve it, sitting up in a dignified place. Guy that does deserve it is down in a lowly place. That's how life works. Verse 7, he says, I have seen servants on horses while the princes walk on the ground like servants. Normally you'd think, who's going to ride the horse? It's going to be the prince. But he says, I've seen that situation switched around. I'm not sure what circumstances. He doesn't explain that. But all he's trying to do is say, I've seen things not act like they're supposed to, not like you would think they should in life under the sun. And then he does another one where in verse 8, he says, he's going to talk about different things. I might as well just say it already so you can see it as we go. He's trying to get across the point that life can be risky even when doing normal things. He says, he who digs a pit will fall into it. Maybe he's digging the pit and stands too close to the edge and slips and falls in. That's kind of stuff happens in life under the sun. Whoever breaks through a wall will be bitten by a serpent. We don't see that happen much these days, but I guess people have broken into a wall and a scorpion comes out or that kind of thing. He's just doing a normal thing. He's breaking, maybe going to knock a hole in the wall for a door or a window, and a snake comes out and bites him. Just unintended consequences, hidden dangers. That's part of life. And then the next verse, he keeps going with that, showing about life can be risky. He says, he who quarries stones may be hurt by them. There's a number of ways that could happen. You're hammering on a stone and chip flies up and pokes you in the eye. You're chopping at a cliff and the whole thing comes down. not any, just doing normal stuff. Things can be risky. He who splits wood may be endangered by it. How many of us have tried to whack a stick and it flies back up and hits us? That kind of thing. Just doing normal stuff. Life can be risky. And so he's going to say in verse 10 a little bit of advice about that, using an example. He says, if an axe is dull and one does not sharpen the edge, then he must use more strength. But wisdom brings success. So what he's saying, work smarter, not harder, and work smart when you're doing these other stuff too, because things can happen even when you're doing normal stuff. You need to be on the ball. You need to be thinking about it and essentially work smarter, not harder. It's a lot easier to just take 5 minutes and sharpen the axe than it is to pound away on splitting wood or cutting down trees because the axe is dull. And that a dull axe is even more dangerous than a sharp one because of uh, the things that you do with it. You have to hit it harder and all that kind of stuff. Anyway, he says the main point is wisdom brings success. In other words, use your brain. What's wisdom? Proper application of knowledge. You know in your head, if I hit that thing, well, I don't know how many times I did this before growing up, but I wanted to break a stick. It was about this big around. I lay it down there, hit it with an axe, and what happens? It flies up and pops you, or the axe, it works like a bow, and the axe comes back up, springs back up. Just not using my head about that. After a while, you kind of start learning you shouldn't do that, but it took me a little while. But wisdom, using the knowledge that you have. Okay, there's going to be consequences. I need to make sure I'm doing things a good way so that I don't have bad consequences. I don't have evil thing happen to me. All right. Anybody got any examples that you want to share? Well, I know you all have examples. You just don't want to share them. Okay. So anyway. Yeah. Well, I got one that I can share. When I was working at American Can Company when I was 18 years old, I was working on a machine that put metal straps around these boxes, and I was just going too fast and getting careless, and one of those wires sprung up and hit me right in the eye, gave me a hematoma. My white part of my eye just turned red, and lasted that way for a week or two until the blood absorbed back into my eye. I learned then, let's sit down and take a little more care of what you're doing. Be careful. And that's the idea. Work smarter, not harder. Uh, God's given us the ability to have knowledge. We learn things, but then it's up to us to use them in a proper way. So that's what he's encouraging, is to use wisdom when you do even just everyday things. Then he says an interesting one in verse 11, a serpent may bite when it's not charmed. The babbler is no different. Well, we have to look at that. We've all heard of a snake charmer, right? The older of us have, in cartoons, you got the guy blowing a little whistle and the snake's coming up out of a basket. Uh, but that really happens. People, I don't know if anybody knows how they do it, but they mesmerize the snake somehow. They can, a cobra can go up and they can just look at it and not get bit by it, because whatever they do, they charm the snake and they don't get bit. If you don't do that first, you put your face in a cobra, what's going to happen? You're going to get your nose bit, and that's not going to be a good consequence. Well, just like you don't want to just handle a snake without knowing how to do it, he says a babbler is no different. And a babbler, in here, that word for babbler means one having a tongue given to wickedness. They must be dealt with shrewdly. A babbler just keeps on talking. I think the word literally, the Hebrew word is two words put together, and it's like literally tongue haver. You know, someone having a tongue, you multiply that, it means he's using the tongue in just any old way, but that's why the word babbler is translated there. But somebody just rattles off and talks and doesn't pay attention to what he's saying, you got to deal with them shrewdly, just like you have to deal with a snake shrewdly. You don't just walk up to one, put your face in the snake. You have to charm it first. You don't just walk up to an idiot and, you got to charm him first. You got to figure out how to settle him down, or whatever you want to say. So these are just words of wisdom for life under the sun, how to get through this life here on earth. He's going to be talking again, just in a little bit, about, okay, the real answer to it all is fear God, keep his commandments, live your life. He said it 6 times now. Live your life, enjoy what you have while you have it. In the meantime, also keep in mind that God's up there and he's watching you, and you got a life after this to worry about. But just to get through this life, there's certain issues, certain things that come up. You got to realize this stuff happens. Things don't always go the way that we like them to go. Life isn't always fair. A lot of times it's not. You have to learn. That's how life goes. You can either accept it and make the best of it, or you can make your life miserable a whole life and then still have to face the same consequences at the end. So God wants you to enjoy what you have. He wouldn't have had Solomon say that 6 times if he didn't. That's why he put us here. Give us a chance to glorify him, but mainly, well, not, I don't want to say mainly, but while we're here, look what I gave you. Yeah, we drove 480 miles yesterday looking at Mount Rainier, White Pass, Snoqualmie Pass, Blewett Pass, Menashash Ridge, all the beautiful views you get from all those places. They're not put there by accident. God put them there for a reason. When he sees us marvel and smile, what do you think he's doing? He's smiling too. Good, they're enjoying what I have given them. That's what life under the sun is. That's the whole point. Life under the sun is vanity of vanities. There's no point to it unless you do what God intended, that you enjoy what God's given you. You can't take anything with you, so you just enjoy it while you have it. That's the whole point of life under the sun. That's what he's trying to get across. He's said over and over, I've tried this, I've tried women, I've tried wine, I've tried wealth, I've tried power. Bottom line, none of it gets you anywhere. You don't take anything out of this life. There's no profit to it. Profit being having more at the end than you had at the beginning. When you pass that threshold from life into death, you have the same thing you had when you started. Nothing. So what do you do in life? Well, you have it, enjoy it. Just make the best of it, and keeping it in the back of your mind, God's looking. He knows what I'm doing. I want to do stuff in a way that would be pleasing to God, but enjoy it. That's what God gave it to you for. Okay, so next we come to verse 12, another one of these proverbs. The words of a wise man's mouth are gracious, but the lips of a fool shall swallow him up. That idea of swallowing him up carries the idea with it, destroy him. Just we might use the term eats them alive. That would be the way we might say something like that. If you're wise, you're going to say stuff that's favorable. That's what grace is, right? Favor, giving the benefit of the doubt, being kind to people, that sort of thing. That's how that works. On the other hand, a fool saying stuff without thinking, insulting people, any number of other things, that'll just destroy him. Nobody will like him. He'll end up putting his foot in his mouth one too many times or whatever, get himself into trouble. Keep that in mind. Now, who did Solomon write the Proverbs to? His son. Starts off by saying, you know, wisdom, he actually personifies wisdom as a woman, saying, here, listen to me, right from the very beginning of the book of Proverbs. And he's doing the same thing in Ecclesiastes. It's the same guy, has the same son. It's already written, well, I don't know, I don't know whether he wrote Ecclesiastes first or Proverbs first. Maybe he wrote these few Proverbs and then think, I could write a whole book about that. I don't know how that happened, but essentially the first reader of this is going to be Rehoboam, his son. And so just keep in mind, whatever advice he's giving to his son is for his best as he walks under the sun. So if it's good for him, what do you think is good for us? Yeah, it is. So all these proverbs are good for us. And then he says in verse 13, the words of his mouth begin with foolishness. Now, whose mouth is he talking about? The lips of the fool. The words of his mouth begin with foolishness, and end of his talk is raving or evil madness. It starts with foolishness, and it just gets worse from there. If you don't do stuff to correct it, if you don't change the way you think about it, it's just going to get worse and worse. And when we think of raving madness, we think of somebody that's, insane. That's not what he's talking about. He's talking about madness being just doing crazy stuff, stupid stuff, that kind of thing. You start out, a foolish person starts out just foolish things that either don't make sense or are not thought through properly, but it just continues on until by the end it's just full of what he started out with, and it'll end up destroying him, just like it says there. The words of his mouth, the lips of his mouth will destroy him. So essentially he's just saying, it starts and it just progresses. Have you ever seen anything not progress or digress or regress? I guess you'd say it's always on the move. And with the foolish person, it doesn't get better. It just keeps getting worse and worse. And we need to think about that ourselves. Verse 14, a fool also multiplies words. How many people do we know that we call them a babbler? Somebody that just talks just to be talking. You never know what they're going to say. And the fact is, they never know what they're going to say. And it just keeps going. That's foolishness. We have to be thinking about what we're saying. Fool multiplies words. And then he says, no man knows what is to be. Foolish person will just say, yeah, this is what's going to happen. This is how it is. Having an explanation for everything, not knowing a thing about what he's talking about. We all know people like that. Just talking, know it all, that kind of stuff. But bottom line is, no one knows what's going to happen. Who can tell them what's going to be after them? We've seen this over and over again in Ecclesiastes already. You don't know what's going to happen after you, so what do? Make the best of what you have while you have it. If you make a lot of money so you can give it to your kids, you don't know what they're going to do with it. They may do good stuff, but on the other hand, they may do bad stuff, totally waste it, ruin it. How many people have you seen inherit a lot of money? I don't mean maybe personal friends, but in the news and that sort of thing, inherit a bunch of money, and then what do they do with it? Just blow it all on stupid stuff and end up being in worse shape than they were before they inherited that money. Same thing with the lottery, that sort of thing. It's a curse to win the lottery, according to most people that have won it and lost everything that they got and lost all their friends and all that stuff that happens. So we don't know. So stop saying you know what's going to happen when you don't know what's going to happen. Then he says, the labor of fools wearies them, for they do not know how to go to the city. That seems kind of, what does that mean? Well, the city is the place where everything happened, all the commerce and the buying, selling, trading, all that kind of stuff. If you want a farmer goes out and does his work to get a crop, but if he doesn't go into the city to sell it, well, how's that going to help him at all? The labor of a fool, they get tired because they're not doing it. They're not doing it the right way, God's way. They're just out there working for. They might be misaligned with God and God's will, and their work drains them rather than satisfying them because they don't know how to make the best of what God has given to them. So we're getting a pretty dismal idea of being foolish. We don't want to do that because it doesn't get you anywhere in this life. Okay,
Because nothing good comes from being a fool.
right, yeah,
He's saying, don't be a fool. What's gonna happen?
he's saying it over and over again. Thought just crossed my mind. I wonder if he said it because he had a kind of a feeling about Rehoboam. What did Rehoboam do the minute Solomon died and he became king? He did a foolish thing. He listened to the young people that were saying, okay, man, your dad taxed them. Let's see how much we can tax them and get more money. You can do more stuff. And ended up losing his kingdom. All but two of the tribes followed after Jeroboam. So Solomon may have been able to see a little bit in the character of Rehoboam. Maybe prompted him to say some of this stuff. Obviously, didn't soak in too good with Rehoboam, but it can soak into us if we just will listen to us and look at the example of Rehoboam. Sue?
Solomon. Good idea that Rehoboam wasn't, like the sharpest crayon in the box or something. And he was gonna have to turn over his kingdom to him, whether he wanted to, not really.
Yeah.
He had no choice about that. And he's trying to help him. But as we look at history, Rehoboam is not bright enough to do it.
Yeah.
He doesn't take his father's advice.
Right. And part of it is his heart isn't set with God as well. Even a person that doesn't have the best sharpener for his crayon, they can still be successful in this life and they can do good things if they're doing what God wants them to do. If they're working within God's rules, you're being kind to people, not getting angry and saying stuff out of line and that kind of stuff. We just have to be wise about stuff. Obviously, for a ruler, one that's has power, has money, has just about anything he wants, it's on a whole different level. But it's the same idea. And then he says in verse, okay, pardon me, where are we at? Yeah, we're in 16. He says, woe to you, O land, when your king is a child and your princes feast in the morning. Now, he's not saying when your king is 6 years old. I mean, they've had kings that are 8 years old. Josiah was well, they didn't have it yet, but they were going to have a king that was 8 years old when he became king. But he's not talking about literal physical age. he's talking about somebody who acts like a child, an immature person. Woe to your land when your king acts like a child, and your princes feast in the morning. Well, but the idea of feasting is just doing all the debauchery or everything. So the wine and all that kind of stuff. Just doing that in the morning instead of getting up and trying to do something constructive with your life. Remember what he said in Ecclesiastes 3 and 4? To everything there's a season. There's a time for feasting, enjoying, living it up, so to speak, as long as you do it within, moral parameters. But the morning, when you first get up in the morning, that's not the time for wine and women and all that kind of stuff. That's not right. That's a foolish kind of person. And a person that has that kind of a king is in trouble. Again, think of Rehoboam. You don't want to pay attention to those young guys, those princes. You want to listen to the old folks that have some experience under their belt. Anyway, same principle. He says, "Blessed are you, O land, when your king is the son of nobles and your princes feast at the proper time." There is a proper time for that. The noble, being a son of noble, means of noble character, just like Jesus uses the term, "You sons of snakes," talking about the Pharisees and the scribes, the Pharisees. He calls them sons of snakes because they're like that. They're like snakes, slithering on the ground and, have evil intentions, so to speak. That's what he means by son of nobles here. It means when your king is of noble character. That's a blessed land when your king has noble character and the princes feast at the proper time, not in the morning, but at the proper time. And feasting can be for two things, for strength or for drunkenness. When you feast, what's the kind you're supposed to do? Feasting for strength, eating good food and stuff, not getting drunk, not whooping it up like that. That's not what the proper feast is. There's a proper feast and a proper time, but it's for strength, not for drunkenness. Keep that in mind, Rehoboam, when you have your buddies over. Use some wisdom. Work smarter, not harder. Verse 18, because of laziness, the building decays, and through idleness of hands, the house leaks. So we all know of examples like that. If your house roof starts leaking, you look and you see a drip after a rain, what do? I'll do it next week, maybe next month. Well, what happens if you do it? That leak doesn't get any smaller, does it? It gets bigger, more damage is done, and the building decays because of it, because of being too lazy to get up on the roof and fix the leak when you see it. I admit I don't think I've ever not fixed a leak on the roof before, but there have been things that needed to get done around the house that I just put off and make it harder for myself when I finally get around to doing it. Laziness causes decay. Idleness of hands causes problems. I just thought of it came and went. So that's what happens when you're 76. Things come and go. If I think about it, I'll say it. Anyway, verse 19, a feast is made for laughter, and wine makes merry, but money answers everything. It's kind of speaking in the mind of a ruler or a king. That's great. Let's whoop it up. Let's have some laughter. And wine makes us happy and everything. But then he says, money answers everything. I put outside, that's the motto of a foolish leader. You know, if something goes bad, throw money at it. You know, that'll fix everything. Well, money doesn't always fix everything. People are constantly suing other people for whatever, and they get the money. Does it really fix it? The heartache, everything is still there. Somebody gets killed in an accident by a negligent driver. You can sue them, get $1 million, but does that take your pain away? No, it doesn't. So money isn't the answer to everything, but that's what a lot of people think, that let's just live it up, make merry, spend the money, everything's going to be good, everything will be great. That's the way to get through this life. Okay, we have a couple seconds left, so we'll finish up this chapter. Verse 20, do not curse the king, even in your thoughts. Do not curse the rich, even in your bedroom. For a bird of the air may carry your voice, and a bird in flight may tell the matter. This is where we get the saying, a little bird told me. News gets around. Even from your bedroom, you're muttering under your breath stuff. And of course, he's in a position of having servants, so was Rehoboam. Servants hear stuff, and a good servant keeps his mouth shut. But there's always that one that'll spread stuff around. And he says, don't curse the king. Don't even think about it. It's just going to cause you problems. It's always going to come out. It's always going to find out. I put it down at the bottom, for the night has 1,000 eyes. Some of you remember that song. And that's what happens. And sometimes, someplace when you least expect it, smile. You're on candid camera. People see things that you don't think, hear things that you don't think. Better keep it to yourself. That's what he's trying to get across here in these verses. Anybody have any questions or comments?
Don't take these things to bed, they tell on you,
Oh,
Oh,
yeah.
say something, it'll record it.
I don't know why Solomon didn't mention that, but anyway, that is true. Next week in chapter 11, it's some more parables. So we'll look at some more parables next week in chapter 11. There's no more comments, questions. Class dismissed. We'll be back again 11 o'clock for our worship.